Grüß, willkommen in einem anderen Aufregungsvideo. Welcome to yet another exciting video. In this case, a video covering episodes 68 to 73, Season 3 of Star Trek, the original generation. This video looks at a number of episodes of Star Trek, the original series or generation, to identify historical references which can be used to determine the original history of the Star Trek universe. Special thanks to the transcripts which can be found on the Chakotay site. The episode order is the production order. In order to understand the development of the history or vision of this series, we need to study the episodes in the order they were written. While I'm uncertain of the exact writing order, the production order is about as close as I can get. When Gene Roddenberry created Star Trek back in 1966, he had a vision which remained basically consistent over the following 3 years. The animated series and early movies retained this consistency in the most part. When The Next Generation was released in 1987, Gene's vision had changed, and the past needed to change in order to be consistent with this new vision. This video series will look at the original vision of Star Trek, starting with the earliest source material. Wink of an Eye is the 11th episode of the third season. It was the 68th episode produced. Its stardate is 5710.5, and its original air date was the 29th of November 1968. In this episode, we discover an alien planet called Skarlos, which is seemingly uninhabited, even though a city on it is intact. The Enterprise was in an outer quadrant, or let's just say beyond the Federation border, when it found this planet. Quote, the Enterprise received distress calls from an apparently uninhabited, incredibly beautiful city on the planet of Skarlos. At its peak, the civilization on Skarlos consisted of 900,000 people, and the city held 113,000 people. Not a particularly large civilization. A long time ago, which could have been a short time in normal time, the civilization was hit by volcanic eruptions, obviously global, which caused everyone to accelerate. I assume they rebuilt the city and created a drug which accelerated others. The result was sterility in the men, so the women needed other men. This is clearly a human or humanoid civilization, perhaps placed there by the preservers. If global volcanoes caused the disaster, the city could not be rebuilt until the eruptions had reduced or stopped. The Enterprise does not mention any volcanoes, so this could indicate the global volcanic eruptions occurred a long time ago. This could be similar to the Siberian traps, which meant it must have occurred about 6 million years ago. How could this work? Let's assume the effects of this volcanic eruption was acceleration, but another effect is longevity, which must be hundreds of thousands of years for each individual. The race could have survived in safe areas, and when the eruptions ended, they went out to build their city, which would have occurred 20 minutes earlier in the normal time, possibly. As they have lured people several times in the past, this would have been actually several hundred years in the past, not just 20 minutes. This is an incredible stretch, but it's the only theory which seems to fit the facts that are provided. The key takeaways from this episode are another alien planet with an alien civilization on it which will soon become extinct. Saras. It's rather sad. I wonder why the drug to reverse the time acceleration used on Kirk was not effective on the aliens. That which survives is the 17th episode of the third season. It was the 69th episode produced. Its stardate is unknown, and its original air date was the 24th of January 1969. The Enterprise finds a ghost planet, and it does not look very natural. We later discover it is artificial, but only has a name of Outpost, or possibly Post. Quote, Kirk, a ghost planet. Spock, I suggest no supernatural explanations, captains. I merely point out that the facts do not fit any known category of planets. In this episode, we discover the Enterprise can travel 990.7 light years in 11.5 hours at warp 8.4. This is very fast, much faster than any earlier references to the speed of the Enterprise. The ghost planet, unnamed, was created by Calandrians. This resulted, that is the creation of a ghost planet, resulted in a deadly disease which killed everyone. A ship was sent back to the home planet carrying the disease because it was seeking help, and the result was it destroyed the entire civilization. This artificial planet was protected by an automatic defense system or computer. We can assume there is another dead civilization out there on a planet which used to be called a Calandrian. Key takeaway from this episode are we discover yet another dead alien planet, in this case a Calandron. I have no idea of its age, perhaps as a wild guess, 100,000 years old, but this guess is only a placeholder. This civilization created an artificial planet called Outpost, which caused the disease in some weird and strange manner. Let That Be Your Last Battlefield is the 15th episode of the third season. It was the 70th episode produced. Its stardate was 5730.2 and its original air date was the 10th of January 1969. In this episode we discovered another Federation planet, in this case called Arianus. It's almost certainly a Federation planet and has a population of billions, so it's almost certainly a Federation member or full member planet. We get a mention of Starbase 4 again. The Enterprise remains obviously in the same general area for this season, at least so far. The Enterprise meets a strange race which has black on one side and white on the other. There are two aliens which have their colours reversed, obviously two different races. One of the aliens calls the Federation United Fleet of Planets, but this is corrected by Kirk. In this episode we discover that the strange aliens come from an alien planet called Charon, which is the home of this bi-coloured people. The two aliens left their planet 50,000 years ago, so whatever destroyed the civilization must have occurred far more recently, perhaps 100 years. Although if there are corpses, this must have occurred very recently. I suspect this is an error and the corpses are really just the remnants of the bodies, probably skeletons, etc. Key takeaways from this episode are there is a major Federation planet called Arianus with a population of billions. We discover a new alien non-Federation civilization and planet, Charon. This civilization is now extinct, although there's probably still two individuals running around on it. It's interesting that these two guys have lived for 50,000 years. Another very stretched premise here. Whom God Destroys is the 17th episode of the third season. It was the 71st episode produced. Its stardate was 5718.3 and its original air date was the 3rd of January 1969. Elba 2, appropriately, is a Federation prison planet. It's not normally habitable. In the episode, the key protagonist, Captain Garth, comes from a planet called Izar. Izar must be a Federation planet, most likely a human non-colony planet, probably a full member planet, considering that Gareth is a Starfleet fleet captain, or Starship fleet captain. We meet another green-skinned Orion woman. Always good to see them in an episode. In this episode we also meet an Andorian. As well, we also meet a Tellarite. In this episode we also discover a new planet, Antos 4, which houses a peaceful non-human civilization. The inhabitants have the ability to shapeshift, which they teach to Garth. They were probably not a Federation member when Garth encountered them. It's likely they are a Federation planet, as the Federation borders would have moved far past their planet, but as there is a lack of shape-shifting characters in Star Trek, I have to assume they remained comparatively independent, and maybe even the survey that found them was well outside Federation space and they're not there. So as a result, they may not be part of the Federation today, or at a later time. They may have been discovered after 2245. This episode provides some details of a Federation victory at Axanar against an unknown enemy, with Captain Garth commanding the Federation forces. Assuming Garth was 30, which is young but possible, and now he is 50, this may have occurred around about 2246. There was a battle between the Klingons and Federation in 2242, which may have lasted until 2245, so I assume this was part of that conflict. This war was a minor affair and involved allies on both sides, possibly similar to the modern Korean War. The result was a draw, which may be a good description of the Korean War as well. Thus, possibly I assume that's the analogy that the writers used. In the episode, it's mentioned the Enterprise fought a Romulan vessel at Tau Ceti, which must have been the incident which occurred in 2264, 2 years prior. Assuming this is correct, we now know the planet where the Enterprise destroyed the Romulan bird of prey, as well as the manoeuvre used. Quote, What maneuver did we use to defeat the Romulan vessel near Tau Ceti? The key takeaway for this episode is we get a long list of new planets. Elba 2, Federation prison planet. Izar, Federation member planet, most likely human. TOS, alien independent planet. And Civilisation, which are shapeshifters. Axanar, location where the Federation defeated, most likely a Klingon fleet in a minor Cold War-style conflict. It's likely Axanar was in Federation allied space, so the planet may have been a Federation allied planet. Or it could have alternatively been totally uninhabited, we just don't know. Tau Ceti, planet in Federation space where the Federation defeated a Romulan warbird, specifically the Enterprise defeated it. Most likely the planet is uninhabited or could have been a minor Federation colony planet. Again, we just simply don't know. The Mark of Gideon is the 16th episode of the third season. It was the 72nd episode produced. Its stardate is 5423.4 and its original air date was the 17th of January 1969. Gideon is an alien planet which is not part of the Federation but probably within Federation space. Quote, "We are orbiting the planet Gideon, which is still not a member of the United Federation of Planets." In this episode, Kirk indicates the Enterprise is in a geosynchronous orbit over the capital city of Gideon, which is surprisingly a great distance away, which means that that's how far the teleporters can potentially work. Perhaps it had to be a bit further away than normal because the Gideons had some sort of protection system which prevented the use of teleporters. Interesting fact. We discover in the episode that Gideon is a planet free of disease and with no birth control. The result is a overpopulated hellhole. I'm uncertain why they have not run out of food. Quote, "Because there are so many of us, so many, there is no place, no street, no house, no garden, no beach, no mountain that is not filled with people." Kirk apparently has an illness called vegan choriomeningitis, which almost killed him. I'm assuming this may come from a system called Vega. Could be Vega Colony or Vega 9, which we've mentioned earlier. Quote, "Holden, but we do. She has vegan choriomeningitis." Kirk, "It's very rare and always fatal if not treated within 24 hours. The key takeaway from this episode are we discover a new alien planet called Gideon, which is an overpopulated hellhole. There is a serious disease which originated from Vega, either Vega Colony or the other Vega planet that we've covered before. The Lights of Zetar is the 18th episode of the third season. It was the 73rd episode produced. Its stardate is 5725.3 and its original air date was the 31st of January 1969. In this episode, we discovered the Federation as a planet which contains all the knowledge of the Federation, called Memory Alpha. I suppose we could say it's a Federation library planet. Quote, "The Enterprise is en route to Memory Alpha. It is a planetoid set up by the Federation solely as a central library containing the total cultural history and scientific knowledge of all planetary Federation members." Kirk mentions in this episode that there are 430 crew, which aligns with most other references, obviously except for the very first one, which was a much lower number. We already know that there is more than one Martian colony. We discover in this episode a Martian colony number 3, so there must be a Martian colony number 1 and 2 as well. These are colonies which the inhabitants of Mars created, not on Mars itself. Now, look, I could be wrong, but if this referred to colonies on the planet of Mars, why is there a Mars 3? There'd just be a Mars as a full Federation planet by now. In the episode, we are told that Zetar is an alien, non-Federation planet which was destroyed a millennium ago, 1,000 years I expect. So this would have occurred in 1266 AD. Let's now look at the key takeouts from this episode. We get the names of a few additional planets. Memory Alpha is a Federation research or library planet. We get the name of one of the Mars colonies, in this case Martian Colony 3. Thus there must be a Martian Colony 1 and Martian Colony 2 as well. Zetar is an alien planet which was destroyed in 1266 AD. We reaffirm that the crew of the Enterprise is 430, or that's the number, which allies with the episode called Shore Leave. And so we come to an end of this video. The episode scripts can be found using the URL shown here. Studying the early episodes makes it obvious that many of the latter Star Trek TV series and movies and shows do not align with the original vision of the series. Alle guten Dinge kommen zu einem Ende.